Remember when cars had cassette players, chrome bumpers, and ashtrays in every door? The 70s and 80s were a golden era of wild automotive experimentation. Car companies were throwing spaghetti at the wall. Some ideas stuck, but others crashed and burned. From digital dashboards that looked like Star Trek consoles to engines that ran on steam, the auto world wasn't afraid to dream big. But not every dream was built to last. Some of these so-called genius innovations were more trouble than they were worth and vanished without a trace. Let's rewind to a time when automakers were risk-takers and discover the flops they wish we'd forget. In this video, we're hopping into a time machine and cruising back to the 1970s and 1980s, a time when cars were loud, bold, and full of features that seemed straight out of a sci-fi movie. But behind the chrome and velour, not every innovation turned out to be a masterpiece. Some were simply ahead of their time. Others were just plain bad. We're counting down 7 car innovations that had everyone talking, but flopped hard when rubber met the road. For each one, you'll learn why it was invented, what made it exciting, and the surprising reasons it disappeared. Buckle up, because you might just remember some of these, and laugh at how far we've come. Digital dashboards, the future that blinded us. In the early 80s, digital dashboards were marketed as the pinnacle of futuristic driving. Inspired by the booming video game and computer craze, cars like the 1983 Buick Riviera and 1984 Dodge Daytona swapped traditional analog gauges for glowing LED and LCD readouts. At first glance, they looked like something out of Knight Rider, cool, cutting-edge, and straight-up sci-fi. But once drivers hit the road, reality set in. The displays were often hard to read in sunlight, the tech was glitchy, and repairs were insanely expensive. Mechanics hated them, and owners quickly found them more annoying than innovative. On top of that, the novelty wore off fast, and people started missing the reliability of good old-fashioned needles and dials. By the late 80s, most automakers quietly phased them out, leaving behind a digital dream that dimmed just as quickly as it lit up. Car phones, status symbol or static machine. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, nothing screamed success louder than a car phone. They were the ultimate flex, a gadget that made you look like a Wall Street hotshot or an action movie hero. Built directly into the dashboard or mounted to the console with a bulky receiver, these phones used analog radio signals to connect with nearby towers. Sounds high-tech, right? Well, sort of. The problem was that they barely worked. Coverage was spotty, calls dropped constantly, and the cost was through the roof, both to install and to use. Not to mention they added a ton of wiring and weight to the car. Most people who bought them ended up using them more for show than actual communication. Once smaller, cheaper cell phones hit the market in the 90s, the car phone became instantly obsolete. What started as a luxury must have quickly become a laughable relic of a not-so-connected past. Seatbelt interlocks, safety or sabotage? In 1974, the U.S. government introduced a regulation that made seatbelt interlocks mandatory. The system was designed with good intentions. If you didn't buckle up, your car simply wouldn't start. Sound smart? On paper, yes. In practice, it was a total nightmare. Drivers were furious. The interlock system didn't just prevent ignition, it blared loud alarms and flashing lights if the passenger seatbelt wasn't fastened, even if the passenger was just a bag of groceries. People found workarounds like buckling seatbelts behind their backs or jamming the sensors. The backlash was so intense that by 1975, Congress stepped in and banned the requirement altogether. Automakers quietly removed the feature, and it became one of the most hated safety flops in car history. While today's seatbelt reminders are far more refined, this early attempt at forced safety was a classic example of good idea, terrible execution. Gas-turbine engines. Jet power for the streets? Imagine firing up your car and hearing the roar of a jet engine. That was the dream behind Chrysler's experimental gas turbine cars in the early 1970s. Using technology borrowed from aircraft, these engines promised smooth operation, fewer moving parts, and the ability to run on anything from diesel to tequila. It sounded revolutionary. Chrysler even built a fleet of prototype turbine cars and let real people test them. But there was a catch, or several. Turbine engines guzzled fuel like crazy, ran extremely hot, and produced an eerie whine that unnerved passengers. Worse, emissions didn't meet tightening environmental standards, and repairs required specialized knowledge that most mechanics didn't have. Despite all the hype, the program was quietly shelved, and the cars were recalled and mostly destroyed. What was supposed to be the next big leap in automotive engineering ended up as little more than a museum piece. Automatic seatbelts. Lazy safety. Gone wrong. In the 1980s, automakers scrambled to meet federal safety regulations without adding expensive airbags. Enter the automatic seatbelt, a system that slid a shoulder belt into place automatically when you shut the door or turned the key. It looked futuristic and hands-free, but it quickly became one of the most hated features in automotive history. For starters, many of these systems left out the lap belt, offering a false sense of security. Worse, they often jammed or moved too slowly, and more than a few caught long hair or clothing in the track. Some drivers even disabled them entirely out of frustration. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration eventually admitted the systems didn't do enough to protect passengers, and when airbags became more affordable in the early 90s, automatic seatbelts were unceremoniously retired. Today, they're remembered less as a safety breakthrough and more as an awkward stopgap that nobody really misses. Talking cars, cool gimmick or creepy companion? In the early 80s, car makers thought the next big thing was a vehicle that could talk to you. Models like the 1981 Datsun Maxima and the 1986 Chrysler New Yorker came equipped with voice alert systems that warned drivers with phrases like, "Your door is ajar," or "Please fasten your seatbelt." At first, it felt like something out of Knight Rider. The car seemed alive, interactive, futuristic. But the novelty wore off fast. The voices were robotic and repetitive, and the alerts often triggered at the worst times, or for no reason at all. Drivers found them more annoying than helpful, and some even pulled the fuses to silence their chatty companions. Adding insult to injury, the systems added cost and complexity without real benefit. By the early 90s, most manufacturers dropped the idea, realizing drivers preferred silence over synthetic scolding. The talking car became a punchline, another tech trend that didn't quite find its voice. Hidden headlights, style over substance? Hidden or retractable headlights were the epitome of cool from the late 60s through the 80s. Found on iconic rides like the Corvette, the Mazda RX-7, and the Pontiac Firebird, they gave cars a sleek, aerodynamic look when closed, and a dramatic flair when they popped open. But beneath that stylish facade lurked a mechanical headache. The motors that lifted the lights were prone to failure, especially in cold or wet climates. Nothing ruined the vibe like a headlight stuck halfway open, leaving your car looking like it had a lazy eye. Repairs were costly, and safety concerns grew as regulations around pedestrian impact evolved. By the early 2000s, hidden headlights vanished from new models altogether. Still, they left a lasting impression, and a deep nostalgia for an era when design took bold risks. But speaking of risky designs, in our next video, we're diving into car interiors so bizarre, you'll wonder what designers were thinking. So there you have it, 7 car innovations from the 70s and 80s that were supposed to change the game, but ended up being cautionary tales. From glowing dashboards to whining turbines and talking cars that wouldn't shut up, these ideas show just how bold, and sometimes bizarre, automotive design used to be. But even the biggest flops carry a strange charm, don't they? They remind us of a time when car companies weren't afraid to take chances, for better or worse. Which one of these do you remember the most? Or better yet, did your family car have any of these brilliant failures? Share your memories in the comments. We'd love to hear your stories from the driver's seat of the past. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, don't forget to hit that like button. It helps more nostalgic gearheads find our videos. And if you're new here, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode, where we'll uncover the weirdest and most questionable car interiors ever made. Trust us, you haven't seen bizarre until you've seen a dashboard made entirely of wood grain vinyl. This channel is your home for retro rides, forgotten tech, and the wildest ideas the auto world ever dreamed up. So buckle up, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next one.